Greetings and welcome to Peter's Passion. So today I'm going to share with you my life story and my testimony. I was born on the 10th of December 1993, born in a place called Buhera in Zimbabwe, Nerutanga. It is in the Manicaland province. I was born to a polygamous family. My father had 2 wives. My mother being the first wife, he also had a second wife. So my father was staying out working. One day he came back home to his wives and they received him. My mother took him to her house and she prepared for him round nuts. My father ate the round nuts that was prepared by my mother, and it was also said that I was also in his arms eating with him. Just after my father finished eating, his skin began to change. He started vomiting blood. In a short time, my father lost his life. And after that, both his wives were pointing fingers at each other. The second wife saying, "You cooked for our husband and you killed him." My mother also was saying, "You gave me what I cooked, so you had poisoned the round nuts already before you gave me." So they pointed fingers at each other, and my father's family was involved and they were enraged. Soon after my father's burial, my mother took me back to her father's place, and the second wife took her son back to her father's place. I stayed with my grandfather and my grandmother. My grandfather was also a polygamous man. After a while, my mother got married again in the same area she grew up in. It was not far from where her father was staying, so I could visit my mother a few times where she was married. But as young as I was, I could understand that I'm not welcome here. So my mother also got married as a second wife. So she came from a polygamous marriage. She went again as a second wife to a polygamous marriage. So I was staying with my grandfather. He was a loving man. Everything he had, he could share with me. My grandfather loved me so much. And as I stayed with them, I started doing my grade 1. I was smart in school. After that, I did my grade 2. But before I finished my grade 2, my grandmother from my father's side came. And the time she came, my grandfather was not there, the father to my mother. So she came. That time there were no phones. She said to my grandmother, the mother to my mother, she wanted to take me back with her. And my grandmother had no power to stop her, so my grandmother, the mother of my father, took me with her. She also went to my father's second wife to take my young brother also with her, so she took both of us. And this was the year 2000. So we left Buhera and went to Gokwe. As we were on our way to Gokwe, we stopped by an auntie who was along the way, who gave me 2 pairs of shoes. And those shoes were size 4s, and the size 4s were too big for me. So we took the shoes, we went to Gokwe. So as the language I was speaking when I was in Buhera was different from the language that was spoken in Gokwe, we had to stay home with my young brother for that entire year. We stayed home learning the language. And in the year 2001, I started my grade 1. So my grade 1, I was winning. Grade 2, winning. Grade 3, winning. And poverty started creeping in. So I did my primary school with no shoes. And as I was growing, I started getting worried, started missing the people I had left in Buhera, because they took better care of me than the people I was with. So I felt betrayed. I felt like my mother had betrayed me, and I felt rejected. And my grandmother was also staying with a niece, the daughter of my auntie. She was a bit older than me with a year. So you know, when there are 3 children living in one place, 2 would become friends and 1 would be an enemy. So my young brother and the niece became friends, and I got rejected. I was not their friend, and we hated each other. We always fought. That's when I started feeling the rejection. So I did my primary school, but as time went on, I started hating school. So with that, I grew up with anger issues because I felt rejected by my mother. I felt also like my grandparents to my mother's side had also betrayed me for letting me go. And the life I was living this side was not good compared to the life I was living in Buera with my mother's parents. I didn't like school anymore because I had no uniform. I had no shoes. So I started dodging school with a friend. So I went from grade 1 to grade 7 with no shoes, with no uniform. So I had bilharzia. I do not know if I got it from the school toilets or from the dams and the rivers we were swimming in, and I was passing out blood in my urine as a child. And I also grew some wounds in my head. And I forgot to say, my grandmother was attending a church that would not allow us to go to the hospital. So when I grew wounds in my head, I could not go to the hospital. So the wounds in my head ate up my head to a point where I lost hair, and they were putting Colgate on those wounds so that the flies would not eat up the wounds. And I ended up wearing hats as a child, so to protect my head from houseflies. So I grew up wearing hats, and till this day I'm still wearing hats. It became a habit. So as I grew older, I did not have clothes. So when we would go to church meetings, sometimes I would steal clothes. So the lifestyle of stealing came into my life. Not that I wanted to steal, but I stole because I didn't have. So one day there was a story that took place. My grandmother had a few goats. So one goat had gone missing. And after a few months, the goat was found in another village. And somebody said, we saw the goat in the village across the river. So my grandmother sent me to go and fetch the goat. And for sure, I went there to fetch the goat. But on my way back, as I was crossing the river, I found friends swimming. I joined those friends who were swimming, and we took our time swimming, I think, for about 3 hours in the river. And after that, when I came out of the water, I could not find the goat again. So I went home to my grandmother. My grandmother asked me, where is the goat? And I said, I don't know. I told her what had happened. But my grandmother did not believe the story. And she took me to the village people, to the village heads and the village kind of like security or police, let me rather say. When I went to the village police could not do anything rather than threatening me. So he sent his son to go get some sticks to beat me. The bad thing about his son is that I was attending school with him in the same class. So I knew the next day I'm going to school, he's going to tell the whole school. So that contributed also to me not liking school, because I knew people would mock me for what had happened. So as this son of the policeman gathered sticks for his father to beat me so that I could talk and tell them where I had put the goat, he flogged me. Once he asked me to tell him where was the goat, and I had to create a story. I said to him, I sold it. Who did you sell it to? I told them the name of a person that came into my mind that was staying close to that area. And they stopped beating me. So they took me with my grandmother to that man's place. And as we got there, that man was captured. He was harassed. He was in so much pain. And then when we were on our way to the police station, to the main police station, my grandmother changed her mind. She said, okay, it's fine. Let's just drop this case and let it go. If I have to lose, I have to lose. And that's what happened. My grandmother dropped the case. But did I sell the goat to that man? No, I did not. It was just a way of me escaping, because the sticks that were gathered for me to be flogged was way too much. So I had to figure out a way to escape the flogging. So in this area that I grew up in, there were spiritual stories that were taking place that we experienced. People were getting beaten by things they would not see. I witnessed that. There were a lot of mysterious things going on in that place. It was also said that people would get to a bus station and they would meet someone and speak to someone, and when the bus comes, that person disappears. Such kind of weird stories would happen in that place. We have witnessed so much witchcraft, even at school. doing sports. Children would get beaten by things they don't see, and the teachers would take cooking oil and salt and squeeze and rub on their bodies until those things begin to talk. I would say maybe demons speaking through the child. And the teacher would ask, "Why are you doing this?" And they would say, "We were sent to beat the child so they will not run faster than our child." Those kind of things were happening. In my family, at our house, my grandmother had other sons that were staying in the area. Their children would get beaten, and at midnight we would go call someone who would help them. I witnessed so much witchcraft. I saw a lot of things, mysterious fires that would burn the bushes at night, but the bush is not consumed. It was such a place where even if you hear someone calling your name at night, you would not answer because you would lose your voice for good and forever. It was such a place where children would get missing, and the elders and the people of the village would wake up looking for the child and finding the child maybe deep in a well, alive, deep in a cave, and they do not know how it happened. So my grandmother had a last born that we were staying with, my uncle, and he also had another uncle. And I forgot to mention my father had a twin brother. The three of them were all staying in the same area, but they had their own homes. These uncles used me. These uncles, the only way I can remember them is looking at the scars they left on my body. They would come to my grandmother and tell my grandmother, "I want the boy. I want to go do something. I want to go work tomorrow." Each of them would come and take me and bring me back home maybe the next day. They would beat me so bad that sometimes when I'm coming from school with other children, they would say, "You have to be the first one to get here. If somebody passes here before you get here, I would be in trouble." He would beat me in front of other kids because our house was right at the main road where school children would pass by. So they would watch me getting beaten by my uncles. So I got to a point where I wished my uncles dead because they made me suffer. They would beat me left, right, and center. None of these three uncles bought me anything in my entire life. They would just use me and not help me with anything I needed. Now, the village I grew up in was very poor. Very poor to an extent that if somebody would visit from the city bringing bread, you could perceive the smell of bread from afar. If somebody would come to that village with a car, everybody would be nervous because they would think only cars could come in that area when they bring a corpse, when they bring a dead body. Cars would not come there. Nobody had relatives with cars. Even if it's at night, in the middle of the night, and people see the lights of a car, people would panic thinking that there's a dead body coming. A car would drive in that village and leave the village, and after 4 hours, you could still perceive the smell of petrol in the village. The tire prints would stay there after the car had left, would stay there for 3 to 4 months. If it's not windy days, that's how poor the place was. The village heads would catch witches right in our eyes. Mysterious things would happen in the village. We were so far away from grinding mills that we could travel 20 to 30 kilometers to go find a grinding mill. And when you get there, there is either no electricity or it's not working. The machine is not working. So you have to wait there until they fix it, or you have to come back and go somewhere else, far again. So remember I told you I grew up with no shoes. But earlier I had said I got 2 pairs of shoes from an auntie when I was on my way with my grandmother when she took us. But what happened with those shoes was that at that time the shoes would not fit because they were big. So I waited for my feet to grow. But at that time, I needed money. So I gave a nephew a pair of shoes, and I was left with one. Second one, the church I was attending, we were not allowed to enter the church with shoes, so we had to leave the shoes outside. And one day when I went into the church and came back, there were no shoes. Shoes had gone missing. So I grew up with no shoes. So time went on. My uncle that we were staying with, he left, he went to the city. And I was left with my grandmother and my young brother and my niece. And from that time, I became the man of the house. I think I was around 15 years, or between 10 to 15 years, became the man of the house. So I started going to my secondary school. All this time I'm going to school, BIM was paying for my school fees. So I did my grade 1 in 2001, grade 7, 2007. Form 1, 2008, I did my Form 1 with no shoes, with no uniform, with no books. My school fees was paid, but my grandmother could not buy me books. So I did my Form 1 with no books, with no pen. I would just escort others. Form 2, it was 2009. I went halfway with no shoes, with no books, until one teacher said to me, come and work in my field, then I'll give you books. I did that. I went to work in his field. He gave me books, but still the books were not enough. So I had about 4 to 5 books, but I needed more than that. And in that year, teachers were also striking. So there was not really much that was done in that year. The next year, I did my Form 3. And that time there was the Methodist Church that came into our lives. They started giving us clothes, buying us food, taking us out sometimes. I really thank the Methodist Church for doing that. When I did my Form 3, now my grandmother gave me a piece of land. So I grew cotton in that land. And when we harvested our cotton, I sold my cotton and I got $63. I bought myself a radio. I bought myself school uniform for the first time. I bought myself shoes and a belt. The money was finished. For the first time, I was proud to go to school with other kids because I had bought myself uniform. So I did my Form 3. Still now in secondary school, I did not know anything because I had not done anything in Form 1. I had not done anything in Form 2. So everything that was in Form 3 was obviously what they had studied in the previous grades. So I did not know anything now in secondary school. So I was just escorting others again. My Form 4 time came where we had to register. They needed $40 for me to register, and I could not find the $40. So I stopped going to school. That was me saying goodbye to school. And I stayed home when others were writing. So after I dropped out of high school, I asked my grandmother if I could go to the city to look for greener pastures. And I went to the city when I was, I think, 17 or 16 years. Now stay tuned for the city life. Click subscribe, that whenever I'm going to post that video, you'll be notified. So with that for now, I say goodbye.